Hey, BookTube, Chelsea, the Reading Outlaw here to do my nonfiction November TBR. So I know it's been like nothing but TBRs on this channel for a while and like hauls and stuff, but I promise I am reading the books. I'm consuming the books. I'm not just making lists this time. I wasn't going to do nonfiction November because I just read like a really good amount of nonfiction in general, and I had other stuff that I wanted to do, but I always say that and then I always end up doing it because I love this challenge and I love Olive. And when I saw the announcement video and I saw the different categories that Olive had laid out, my brain went wild and I knew that I had to do it. So if you're unaware, Nonfiction November is just a like BookTube, book Twitter, book world community support event where we encourage people to read more nonfiction, even if that just means reading one nonfiction book over the course of the month. The point is just to bring more nonfiction into your life. So in that vein, this year Olive has done a thing where she provides 4 sets of word pairs, and you can do basically whatever you want with those pairs. So it's things like shelf, self, and wonder and wander, and macro and micro, and past time or pastime. I believe those are the categories. And a lot of videos I've seen are wonderful, and they will outline like different books that fit each pair of words. That's definitely one way to do it. I'm going to do it a little differently this year. I love microhistories. I love microhistories. They are my absolute favorite form of nonfiction ever. But so because of that, I read a lot of them. And I don't read a lot of macro histories, which if you're unaware of the difference, macro means big, micro means small. So when I saw that macro and micro was a word pair this year, I just knew that that's what I had to do. So most of these, I have the physical copies to show you, but I'm actually going to be listening to them on audio because that's how I get through a lot of my nonfiction. And there are some in here that I'm just hoping to get to. They don't technically fit the word pair, but the vast majority are macro or micro books. So let's go ahead and start. We'll start with the macro stuff. Here we go. Okay. These are 2 that I found from the library. I was browsing and they just happened to be sitting on the shelf. So Universe said perfect. The first one is Can Democracy Work? A Short History of a Radical Idea from Ancient Athens to Our World by James Miller. And this is exactly what it sounds like. This is a look at the concept of democracy from the Greek foundations all the way up through the current political climate in the United States, how democracy has functioned as an ideal as well as a system of practice. This is exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for in my macro history because it's literally looking at the global span of a concept with something as big as democracy. So, as somebody who feels they are living in a country where democracy is constantly under threat at the moment, I am very much so looking forward to looking at some of the historical roots of both the theory and the practice. This next one is one that I'm going to like read. This one I will probably actually keep in physical form because it would be really complicated on audio. But it's The Story of Food, an illustrated history of everything we eat. So I really like books like this. This is not necessarily like a book, but this is a like fun encyclopedia dictionary. So like here's the entry on onions. So it just talks all about like different kinds of onions, how we eat onions, historical pictures of like people processing onions, how like just a whole bunch of little factoids, and then like here's a section on wartime food. And so it's just like, it's literally what it says, and it's the story of food, but it looks at each individual food or food group and like breaks down that food's role in the history of eating. And like I said, this is a very big book and it's technically like a reference book, so I don't know if I'll read the whole thing, but I will definitely be picking this up and flipping through it every day in the month to just kind of like learn more about food. I always get much more food obsessed when it comes to like fall and winter time because I can have the oven on in my house. So I'm really looking forward to this one. Plus I really like the cover. I really love these bright yellow lemons here. The next macro book that I have is A People's History of the United States, 1492 to the present, which the present as of this publishing was 2003. So this is a book by Howard Zinn. I first read excerpts from this book in my AP government class my senior year, and I haven't touched it since then. But I really like this book. Howard Zinn is a white historian who has basically taken the main narrative of the history of the United States and flipped it to being from the non-dominant perspective. So we hear about the arrival of the settlers from those members of tribal nations. We hear about things like the Civil War in the United States from the perspective of slaves and abolitionists. So it's really challenging the course of how history narratives are built, as well as taking a really big look at what is essentially a very huge chunk of time. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. A lot of these macro books are really big, guys. That's part of the problem with macro books is that they are. They're chunkers. And so this is the last one. I've already started this one on audio a couple of times and had to give it up mainly because it's very long. And it's The Emperor of All Maladies, A Biography of Cancer by Siddhartha Mukherjee. Now, some might argue that this is actually a microhistory because it's only focusing on the history of cancer. However, I've read parts of this book before in various like history of science classes, and it looks quite a bit at just like the general practices of medicine and the evolution of medical history. And it does that through the lens of cancer, but it takes a pretty broad, like it makes some pretty broad historical introductory claims and like lays out a really broad scene of the evolution of medical history, both in the world and then specifically in like the Western world, Europe and the United States. So I'm very much looking forward to this. I also have, I probably won't get to this one because I don't have it on audio, but this is also The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee, and this is literally him looking at the history of the gene and the genome and the discoveries therein, and this is much more microhistory, and because of that, I'm going to swap out this one. As you can see, they're both huge, so we'll see. Then I have my microhistories. In case you haven't, in case I haven't made it clear, I'm hoping to do one of each a week. Like, I'm hoping to do a micro and a macro at the same time and get through one of each a week on audio. It'll be 8 books, and then I will be super stoked if I can get through that and also like the rest of the things that I want to read. So the first microhistory I have, which should surprise nobody, is Gulp by Mary Roach. Not necessarily Gulp, but just Mary Roach. Mary Roach is the queen of microhistories, basically. This is the look at the alimentary canal. So what happens from when we chew and swallow our food all the way through the process. Everybody poops, guys. Yeah. Mary Roach is delightfully disgusting, and I imagine that this book will be her at her finest when it comes to that, because it's talking about the internal bodily processes. I really love Packing for Mars, which is about space travel, and Stiff, which is about what happens to bodies after we die. I also really like Bonk, which is sex science. Like I said, Mary Roach is kind of the queen of the microhistory, so if you're looking for something to pick up in that category, I really, really recommend her. This is just the one I happen to have on my shelf. I'm also trying to clean out my TBR pile. Let's see. Okay. The next one I have is The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness by Michelle Alexander. This is a reread. This is a really, really, really fantastic book. This book basically looks at Jim Crow laws as they currently exist today in the modern penal system, and how the modern penal system is slave labor, and a lot of the most atrocious aspects of the way that we treated people under slavery can be perpetuated and continued in the prison system. I'm really looking forward to rereading it because it's been several years and a lot of things have changed in the political climate since the first time I read it. If you talk to almost anybody who has a concern for social justice or racial awareness, they will recommend this book as kind of almost required reading. So I'm really looking forward to getting to it again. And then we have 2 more books. The first one is in a similar vein to The New Jim Crow, and that is White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism by Robin DiAngelo. Robin DiAngelo is a white lady talking to other white people about why we get so defensive when talking about whiteness and why we privilege from whiteness. This book is a gut check and a reality check and a call to arms to be constantly vigilant against the way that our most liberal and well-meaning tendencies can also tend to make us the most race blind and race dangerous to the people of color in our lives. I've only read the introduction to this, which was written by Michael Eric Dyson, and I am floored. I am taking my time with it. As you can see, I've already started, well, let's get to this in actual pages. I've already started annotating it because I just can't keep my pen out of it, and I really am not enjoying it, but enjoying the process of absorbing this new information. And then the last microhistory I have, stretch for it. This is Ghostland, An American History in Haunted Places by Colin Dickey. So I think this is going to make a really, really fun kind of co-pairing to the Howard Zinn book. Not that they are at all the same thing. That's an actual like history book. This is just something that does the micro history thing of looking at, quote, American history through the investigations of the places in America that are most haunted. It's not spooky month anymore, but we're still in fall time and my brain hasn't fully transitioned over to Christmas yet. So while that's still going strong, I'm going to be picking up and reading Ghostland, and I'm really looking forward to it because I like haunted stuff. And then I have 2 more books that I want to read that are not necessarily microhistories, but are just ones that I really want to get to anyway. The first one is Hell's Princess, The Mystery of Belle Guinness, Butcher of Men by Harold Schechter. Excuse me. This is a look at one of the most prolific female serial killers currently known. When it was discovered what she had done and her bodies were dug up, they found them not only poisoned, as was usually the modus operandi of women, but absolutely butchered. So it's a look of how she came to be, what she did, and what the reckoning was afterwards. You guys know how I feel about serial killers. Female serial killers are always especially interesting to people who really dig the true crime community. I've not heard of Belle Guinness, so I am really, really looking forward to reading this one. It's a little bit chunky, and I have not been able to find an audio copy yet, so fingers crossed I'm able to get through this one before it's due. And then the last one I'm reading because the Stacks Pod, which is a book podcast that I've recently found and fallen absolutely in love with, is reading it for their next book club, November 7th. Hold up the right side of the book, Chelsea. It's To the Bridge, A True Story of Motherhood and Madness by Nancy Rommelman, and I'm just going to read you guys the inside flap. On May 23rd, 2009, Amanda Stott Smith drove to the middle of the Selwood Bridge in Portland, Oregon, and dropped off her 2 children into the Willamette River. 40 minutes later, rescuers found the body of 4-year-old Eldon. Miraculously, his 7-year-old sister Trinity was saved. As the public cried out for blood, Amanda was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 35 years in prison. Embarking on a 7-year quest for the truth, Rommelman traces the roots of Amanda's fury and desperation through thousands of pages of records, withheld documents, meetings with lawyers and convicts, and interviews with friends and family who felt shocked, confused, and emotionally swindled by a woman whose entire life was now defined by an unspeakable crime. At the heart of that crime, a tempestuous marriage, a family on the fast track to self-destruction, and a myriad of secrets that lie as dark and turbulent as the Willamette River. So I'm just very much so, I had not heard of this book before I saw that Stacks Pod was getting ready to read it, and the cover copy really, really intrigued me. It might be kind of difficult to read. Reading about kids stuff is especially hard now that I am a mommy, but I'm also really fascinated by how Nancy Rommelman is going to do this and what the book is going to do and what the kind of central thesis is going to be. So I'm very much looking forward to that one. That's my nonfiction November TBR, friends. Who knows how many of these I'll get through. It's always up in the air. Stay tuned next for my TBR for my month of reread, since it's also my birthday, and I've never been one for smart goal making, friends, so we will see how many I get through. Until next time, please leave me your nonfiction TBR down below if you're doing one. If not, let me know what nonfiction stuff you've been loving over the course of this year. Hit me up on all the social media. It's all in the down bar. Until next time, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have happy reading.